Welcome to yet another Cornell keynote. I'm your host, Lutz Finger. I'm a faculty at Cornell where I teach courses on AI, data, and product strategy. I spend quite a lot of time thinking through how AI actually changes products, markets, and customer behavior. In my own work, I have focused on how digital systems shape what we've seen and trusted. I built up fisheye analytics, wrote a book about it in the social media area. More recently, I sold a company called R to Decide, a platform where we do fine-tuned models in order to help e-commerce workflows. Now, if workflows interest you, eCornet runs a workshop on workflows. This is 3 hours of me where we build our own agents. So if you ever want an agent to manage your invites on email or your emails or summarize your newsletters or whatsoever, I kind of teach you how this works so that you can create templates for companies out of this. So sign up. The link is in the show notes below if you want to join. Today we talk about something else. It has something to do with workflows though, and it has something obviously to do with AI. It is about the power part on AI. AI economic depends on power. Who would have known, right? No, but we often talk about AI in terms of models, chips, applications. But behind of all of this sits one harder constraint. AI needs electricity, loads of it. And as data centers grow and get expanded, the need for AI just accelerates. So the electrical grid today becomes a defining bottleneck, and that has obviously political implication, growth implication. Well, we can even say national security implications. And that's exactly why today's conversation matters. So I'm very, very delighted to be joined by Josh Wong. Hi, Josh. He's founder and CEO of ThinkLabs AI, a specialized AI company focused on exactly this question, critical infrastructure and energy sustainability. ThinkLabs AI is building a grid copilot. So no, not the copilot that talks to you over your email, no, but a copilot that talks about grid planning and operations. And there's a lot of topics which we have discussed on this keynote before in terms of looping back, feedback loop, true north, and we will get to this. This is a super exciting discussion. Josh brings more than 20 years of experience across grid modernization, solar, storage, microgrids, hydrogen, DERMS, you name it. He is your man if it comes to AI and electricity. He previously founded Opus One Solutions and later served as a general manager of grid orchestration at a GE part. So, Josh, welcome to the show.
Nicholas, great to be here today and on an amazingly interesting topic and super timely and relevant as well. So really look forward to it.
So awesome. Yes, like the way we best start this, Josh, is give us a little bit of feedback about yourself. And I think we can start off actually with a huge announcement on the company. So either feedback to like talk about yourself or talk about the announcement, whatever is best.
Yeah, I think it's super timely. So maybe I'll start off with the announcements and go back to a bit of my humble origins. But we just announced yesterday closing our Series A. And this is a very critical milestone because this is where we go from AI being a science project and then experiments and looking for product market fit to now we have product market fit. We're getting more and more demands all the time. I think people are, especially our customers like utility grid owners and operators, are really seeing the need to accelerate AI for the grid. So we raised a $28 million A round and led by, I think it's really the investor group that is significant as well. So led by Energy Impact Partners, one of the world's largest energy investment funds, backed by some of the, again, the largest infrastructure and grid owners and operators and planners in the industry. Along with NVIDIA. So the N Ventures, the venture capital arm of NVIDIA. So bringing the grid and AI together. And then the third is significant as well because they are customers. So Edison International, the parent company of Southern California Edison, one of the most progressive, innovative go-to in terms of grid modernization. So they all came together on this round. Existing investors also participated, including like GE, Vernova, Powerhouse, Blackhorn, Active Impact, Amplify Capital, another large North American utility as well. So it's a critical milestone. We're very, very happy and excited. And now let's just keep running, keep drilling.
Now, this is like having raised capital by myself. I know how stressful it is, and I as well know that this is a huge milestone. Putting the right team together, putting the right support together. Well, we know when it's the right support once you exit, but like, that is the first step, Josh, and congrats for this.
Uh,
So well
thank you.
done. Now,
Thank you.
how did you get here? Like, who is Josh?
Yeah, I'm not going to go back to my immigrant story, but really, I think when I was going in engineering school, you talked about Cornell, but in engineering school, I was trying to find, so where should I apply my electrical engineering skills? I was looking at like solar and wind and hydrogen at that time, but I fell in love with the grid. So I joined the utility back
I
in
need a
2000.
t-shirt for this. I
I
fell
love
in love with the grid. That is, I don't know, Josh.
So we just talked about the Series A story. So when you mentioned us, this is my second startup, selling my last one,
Yes.
Opus One to GE, now GE Vernova. But when I was founding ThinkLabs, my investor friends were pinging me and saying, "Josh, why are you founding another startup to sell to utilities again? And they are great, but they are very, very challenging customer group to sell and work with." And I said, I love the grid. That's it. I have unfinished business, and I see the need to keep modernizing the grid. Yeah. So yeah, in mid 2000s, I joined a utility. It was interesting because I was actually the first engineer they hired in 13 years. So there was a major hiring freeze, major skills gap, and so when I joined, about 50% of the 1,700 utility workers can retire in the next 5 to 10 years. So new kid on the block and really learned a lot from going out in the field to, well, that was the very early days of Smart Grid 1.0. So I hopped onto that trend and really became the leader of the smart grid units. Again, another incubation type of unit, but looked at a lot of cool like modernization activities. So self-healing switching, battery storage, electric vehicle charging, data analytics, metering. So that's the onset of smart metering infrastructure. So ran that for about 5 years, supported regulation and legislation as well. Wrote a 25-year roadmap, which I think 20 years now into the roadmap, it's still fairly consistent. So the vision stays the same. The mission is persistent. Yeah, so I after running that, I founded my first startup, Opus One Solutions. We became known as the world's #1 DERMS company, or DER management system company, focused on grid modeling, but physics-based modeling and large-scale optimization of grid power flow. And yeah, in 2021, that was exited to GE, and that's how I went on the next phase, which is looking at the next 10 years of the grid within GE, the grid of the future. And we realized a strong thesis that we need to help the grid or the utilities accelerate their pace and depth of analysis and decision making. So we coined that autonomous grid or autonomous grid intelligence. For example, a few weeks ago was actually NVIDIA's GTC conference. Lots of talk around autonomous driving. But again, I love the grid. So we really believe that autonomous grid is a more pressing and perhaps even bigger opportunity than driving.
Yeah.
And so we then lean into AI to drive that autonomous grid vision.
Yes. So um, let's talk about your love. Let's talk about grid a little bit. So because, I don't think that most people understand the complexity. Autonomous driving is easy, right? Like you look on the street, you say, I have drunken folks on the street. Like, wouldn't it be way better if an AI drives? But what is the grid? Let's start with the basics. Not everybody in the audience probably knows exactly what a grid is or could describe it. Before you do though that, like quick announcement, like always, if you're new to the show, the other folks know it, but like always, you can ask audience questions. I will monitor them. So at any point in time, see below, there is this window where you just ask anything you want to know. If you don't understand grid, we are a university at the end, so ask us and we will try to make sure that you get the right answers. So, but let's channel the audience question here. Nobody asked this. But by the way, if you put in your name, I will mention you. If you don't put in your name, I won't mention your name, but I still ask you a question if it fits into the flow. So I channel my inner audience. What the heck is the grid? Like, let alone that you fall in love with it. But like, what is it?
Thinking about the movie Tron, but the grid is basically a network. So we actually officially call it the mankind's largest and most complex machine. Some of the computing folks might refute that, but I think actually that was named by the National Academy of Engineering. That it is a very large. It connects the entire North American everybody, basically 100% customer penetration, unless you are in rural areas. And it is extremely complex because it is a continuous supply and demand balancing mechanism. So just like any network, or I always compare it to the roads, that's an electron highway or highway for electrons. It connects between supply generation, whether it's nuclear, wind, solar, gas, etc., with demand, our homes, EV charging, data centers, etc. And it goes in various levels of voltages. Higher voltage are like transmission lines, big, long towers. And then the last few miles might be the distribution system. So a web that connects from substations or key hubs to your homes. That is the grid. But how electron flow?
May I add
Yeah.
one more point to it because I think that's what people might not realize. It is not a one-way street, meaning electrons which gets pushed in from the generation source needs to be used. They cannot just linger around. Maybe explain this a little bit because that's a
Yeah.
real challenge for the grid.
Yeah, I think when smart grid came, people thought we can maybe perhaps packetize electricity. It doesn't work. Like, yeah, we can't assign an IP address and route it easily. It follows the laws of physics, which is from high potential to low potential. It's like the river system. So we don't have stop signs. We can open and close switches, but we don't have stop signs. Hey, electrons, wait here until you turn left or right. So it is also very dynamic. So all the way to each cycle or microsecond, the nature of electricity changes all the time. It has been for the past decades, typically a one-way streak. But what we're doing now is we have distributed resources as well, and more solar and wind. So it's becoming a two-way streak, which becomes extremely complicated to manage. It is also very, very opaque, meaning there's not a lot of sensors and monitors and like camera equivalents to the grid to see exactly what's going on. And given how old it is, most of the grid was built during the post-World War II period. We don't have enough sensing, monitoring, control technologies on an increasingly congested and increasingly two-way system. So that's where we are facing this, not only an asset wall, meaning aging infrastructure, things are failing naturally, but also congestions, violations, factors that might destabilize the system and leading to more wide-scale blackouts.
Totally. So this is super fascinating. I mean, like I like the river example. If you suddenly get many new rivers into a system of waterways, that might clog up and might have very unexpected chaotic consequences. Now, why should the general audience care about the grid? How does it impact economic, or the AI and the grid? How does it impact economic or society or political levers?
Yeah, we commonly say people take the grid for granted until now. I think for the past decades, we assume we flick the switch, we turn the lights on, and we keep the lights on. And that has been the case, and load has been fairly steady until you lose it when we have a blackout. everything gets into chaos. And so now it's even more important because of the overall macro trend around electrification. So buildings are getting electrified, cars are getting electrified, and that is a core part of economic growth. These are major investments to fuel industries and livelihoods and ways of living, standards of living. Now, AI brings this to a whole new level, and it's, I think, if I recall correctly, around 40% of load growth is driven by AI and related data centers right now. And I think ICF just rolled out a report around by 2030, by year 2030, we would be expecting 25% load growth in the US. That is phenomenal, knowing load has been steady, if not declining, over the past few decades. And so that's really what's fueling it. If you look at, for example, NVIDIA's 5-layer AI cake, I don't know if you have been citing that. I have certainly been citing that more and more. So
Yeah.
the whole AI stack is powered by the energy foundation before you hit infrastructure and then models and applications, etc. But that foundation is extremely shaky. And if that foundation is shaky, we won't be able to power AI and all the associated industry. So that's why it's super critical for us right now.
Meaning it's critical on one part, especially in a time where because of the current war, we see energy prices rising. Suddenly, electrical energy has as well a totally different cost. And now, if everybody thinks about it, but I have an EV and I can plug it into the grid, it doesn't work this easily, right? So there is this consumer level challenge. Then there's obviously the economic challenge overall. Energy cost is rising. And then there is a political challenge. We, as the US, would like to be the leader in AI, but in order to be the leader in AI, we need power to
Yes.
actually empower
Yes.
AI.
Exactly. So AI is now a matter of energy security, as you may have seen in recent articles. Whoever wins the energy race wins the AI race, and I think that is really, really real today.
Is the grid in the US is a little bit outdated, to say the least. How are other countries in terms of grids?
I think there's opportunities to leapfrog because brand new infrastructures, they can afford to overbuild a bit and they can provision for future capacity. In the US, we primarily operate in a brownfield application. So instead of a lot of new lines and infrastructures and generators, they will, but these take time and also new right-of-ways. It takes huge rate impacts as well. So while we have to maintain the affordability of energy, like keeping bills affordable, we also need to build new capacity, and that's a very challenging balancing act. I think leading to where AI now comes in is we already have a lot of infrastructure. We have a lot of capacity, actually. Can we utilize that capacity more effectively with intelligence? So sometimes we say intelligence or software AI-driven intelligence is the cheapest form of electricity because it actually optimizes the use of what you have today by understanding the grid more, but also understanding supply and demand more, and how we can line up these by time and location.
Got it. Meaning, to reformulate this, certain countries are way more advanced in grid setup because they had the ability to build greenfield. And the US has an existing grid, and now AI could help them to leverage it to actually leapfrog the greenfield part.
I believe so, yes. And so what that means is whoever, again, I might be repeating myself, but whoever wins the grid intelligence race, hence I
Yeah.
would does the AI race for the grid as well. If we just take a small bit back to the 5-layer cake, a small bit of that AI capabilities at the top layer of the cake to fuel and power for AI to power the grid, the energy foundation itself, this is the flywheel effect that we can leverage. So winning the AI race for the grid also wins the race for the energy security.
Awesome. Now, talking about flywheel, because and we on this show before we talked a lot about data flywheel and feedback loops and all of this. How Do you measure grid success, and how do you as a company optimizing for this success actually have access to this flywheel information? Oh, let me say this differently. A flywheel always works when you have a true north, you have something you want to achieve, then the AI optimizes for it. By doing so, it learns, or
Mhm.
for Google and Meta, it's not the AI, but it's a human optimizing for it. And then an AI learns about those humans, and then you get the new true north again. How does this work in the grid setting? What is your true north, and where do you optimize for?
Yeah, and we can tackle this from various levels too. So let's poke at it from different directions. But on the grid side, we always say the true north is safe, reliable, resilient, affordable energy. So if we have an abundance of resilient, affordable electricity or energy in general, because there are fuel switching options as well, while maintaining the safety and security of the grid, that's what's powers the economy that we looking for and the standards of living that we are. To get to that, we need to understand really how the grid works, meaning how we can optimize for capacity on the grid to make sure we're not overloading the lines. We have to understand all the voltage violations, etc. Not to get too deep into power system engineering, but in terms of what the AI can do, I think let's double click a bit into what the outcomes we want the
Yeah.
AI to do. Number one is we want the AI to be trusted. That's the primary outcome. This is not just putting a whole bunch of SCADA measurements and smart metering information into ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot or Gemini and say, hey, give me how the grid works, give me power flow, basically. It doesn't work like that. So we leaned into something called physics informed AI. So we basically train our AI models using physics. It's physics driven, physics based, and physics accurate. And so basically we're saying, hey, Cornell, I'm sure you run a lot of engineering courses, say, can we teach AI how the grid works? And can I reproduce that engineering analysis faithfully? So that's number one. Second is the outcomes of how much can the AI accelerate and deepen our understanding of the grid to reach the safe, reliable, resilient, affordable outcomes. And so for us is, can we turn traditional studies, which is a core part of the utility's internal processes, that tends to take the order of weeks to months to do a study. And that is actually a primary bottleneck into people connecting to the grid today, data centers, cars, buildings, etc. So can I turn studies from months into minutes? And can I go from onesies and twosies, one feeder at a time, into full system analysis? So that's another key outcome.
Let's let's put a bow on this because this is so important for us to understand. There is an excitement about AI and the market, and that excitement is driven by every consumer now chatting to Gemini or ChatGPT and kind of getting answers that sound smart and sometimes are trustworthy.
Mhm.
That is not what we are talking here. So
Mhm.
what we are talking here is using the power of an AI that can critique itself, that can plan, together with the power of a feedback loop to actually improve an outcome. And this is a very important distinction because people might get confused when they hear about grid improvements,
Mhm.
or, for example, a different topic which we had very often on the show, healthcare. If you think about how does AI kind of create a drug, it's not ChatGPT
Yes.
that creates the
Uh-huh.
drug.
Uh-huh.
It is a workflow that we are having, workflow. That workflow follows certain heuristics, is
Mhm.
controlled, is trusted, and gives then the feedback. So,
Mhm.
and Josh, I paraphrase you because it's such an important point for us to understand. How the grid works is a heuristic approach. It's electrons behave based on physics, but
Mhm.
it's complicated, and therefore it's not so easily to map out in rules. Therefore, we use an AI to test it out and follow the heuristics. Is that correct?
I think so. I think I'm definitely aligned. And maybe two ways of taking this further as well. Um, so one is the grid today, as you mentioned, is very complicated. So the rules are just basically worst case scenario, build it and it will never break type of deal. But that's when we overinvest and bring up people's electricity bills. But the grid hasn't been very data driven. And data availability, data quality has been a huge complex point of complexity for the grid. And so now with AI, we can finally be a lot more data driven. Let me give you one case in point. So when I started my career, I used to be a power system planner. And a joke that we always have is planners are always right because they can blame it on the assumptions. But planners are always wrong because the assumptions are never right. And that's exactly what's happening on the grid because we have all these amazing, incredible engineering software, but we feed it with a ton of assumptions on data that are not correct, we're not confident in its
Not
accuracy.
up to date, right?
Exactly. So the moment you spend your time running first principles driven scientific analysis, the results will be outdated already because it takes so long to run an analysis and it's not what I would call snapped with reality. We see back to the electron highway example with AI now, when we open up a driving app like Google Maps or others, the primary sources of data is actually what's coming from the cars. It's not the width of the street. It's not the duration, the probabilistic duration of those traffic lights. Is the cars that's driving the feedback loop. In this case, it's the smart metering information or the telemetry through SCADA signals that's reinforcing how the grid can improve its accuracy of how it interprets the grid. The second, back to that feedback loop, is around reinforcement learning. So in the past might be mathematical optimization, which like nonlinear mathematics, and that can be hard to find a global optimal and you can optimize for one objective at a time. Here we have such a complex grid. I would compare this to like a millionth dimensional Rubik's cube. My son's a cuber. And so, but we only have capacity to look at one corner at a time. And so we hack it. We corner
Yes.
twist, we take it apart. But here is we are actually having AI to model the entire system in its complexity. And through things like RL, we can finally optimize for the entirety of the grid.
Um, Explain RL for the audience for a sec.
Yeah. So it's reinforcement learning. It's that feedback loop, as you said. So
Exactly.
basically, let's play a big game and put in the right reward and penalty functions so that we can arrive at the optimal outcome.
Yes. You have human reinforcement learning, meaning there is a human in the loop. And here we have a technical RL, which is essentially you test something out and you get feedback. I want to point out that this is a huge area in the whole industry, not only for energy or healthcare, where we will see models thrive. So if you're in the audience thinking about which company to join or where to invest, then listen up. Anything which has the ability to create an RL is helpful. Very early on, one of the things everybody talks about is AlphaGo Zero. The
Mhm.
RL there is computer plays Go, gets a feedback loop within the framework of allowed Go moves, gets feedback whether this works or not. If we do this for the grid, Josh has a model of the grid. Computer starts adjusting parameters in the model and then gets feedback. Is this grid now better or not? In the like for Josh's son, who is a cuber, like the model would try to say like it does some changes in the cube and figure out is this a smart strategy. So that kind of RL, this reinforcement feedback loop, is exactly where will see a lot of new business models coming to market. We had here on the show actually a discussion about recursive learning for coding, for workflows, And now for the grid and for healthcare, right? So you have always this kind of allow the computer to test out things and to learn from it.
Can I give an example on what that is today and along the grid? So today, let's look at the status quo without reinforcement learning and all this AI-based optimization. We, again, planners, we make assumptions, we run an analysis, but the simulation engines give us only problems and not solutions. Hey, we connect this data center, we get alarms everywhere, we have congestions, traffic jams, voltage violations, but the solutioning comes from, I want to say, trial and error. It's the human engineer, which they can be very experienced, saying, I think I can add a line here and alleviate. Let's try this. Let's then each try runs like hours, if not weeks of analysis. I get some feedback, then I can tweak something else. So it's very much a human-based in the loop trial and error, which is great. There's a lot of creativity and intelligence with that. But that process is very, very time consuming. And I think it's up to how many scenarios we can run as well, which is typically 1 to 5 scenarios. That's it. But now with reinforcement learning, we are running millions of simulations and scenarios, pre-training and getting ready to propose the right solutions, not just a trial and error. So the type of answers or solutions we are generating include, well, we still need some lines, yes, but where do we put them and how large? And so we basically generatively designing the grid. Second is, well, a big battery storage is a big thing these days, especially in the past 5 years or so. Can we put in a battery storage unit? Now we can finally pause electrons right on the road, store them for a while before we release them back into the grid again. And third is actually a huge relevant topic today around demand flexibility. So if we have large loads like data center connects, can we flex them? Meaning, can they consume more power sometimes and consume less power these other times? And can those signals be generated by the grid's optimization? This is where orchestration comes in. So all of these are actually part of the feedback loop for the AI to learn and generate these solutions.
Which is fascinating because if you think about the AlphaGo example, Go has a defined space and defined rules.
Yes.
In the grid, you could actually now think about arbitrage models. And I know that Cornell has a lot of financial savvy folks. So here comes a business opportunity. Maybe it is worthwhile selling more electrical cars because it optimizes the ability of the grid. Now that needs modeling to understand, is this the right policy to do in order to support where then your model comes in. We have loads of questions here from the audience, and quick reminder, if you have questions, put them down. I see them all. And I would like to pick up Daniel from Kansas City. He talks about Daria Amodei and Sam Altman committing to massive capex into data centers. And then he talks about that there is discussion of that there's an energy risk, right? And we alluded to this in the beginning, meaning the grid might be a constraint to our growth in the AI
Mhm.
market.
Mhm.
If you look at this, is anybody modeling this out? Are you guys modeling this out? That you would say, okay, well, that's the capacity we have today. That's a realistic capacity we can build, but this is the type of uplift we would assume to get from AI. Do you have an uplift criteria? Do you saying like invest in me and you get 20% more capacity? Is that a thing?
Yes, it is. And it is actually the most relevant topic amongst grid planning, especially regional bulk power system planning these days.
So
The
well asked, Daniel from Kansas City. Yes.
the shortcut that's happening right now is for all these data centers to bring their own power. I think that is a shortcut. So, meaning they can bring their own batteries to buffer their electricity from the grid. They can bring their own gas turbines, for example. And the big topic around, can they bring their own flexibility to the grid as well? Now that's good, but there it's also islanding the data center to themselves. And as we learn from the grid, everybody in it for themselves is not the most economically optimized. The whole point why we are connecting everybody is that we're able to share resources and capacities. So the ability to reinforce the grid and look at how to best where to be, and how to best bring on these large loads is an absolute area of critical studies. We are doing these now. For example, looking at where there is capacity, can we optimize? Can we shorten the quote unquote time to power? So instead of connecting or building data centers and connecting them every 5 to 7 years ahead, can we connect them now? But there might be a bit of bridging solutions, which is some flexibility required while we reinforce the overall grid infrastructure. So there's a lot of variables and options. And again, going back to reinforcement learning, that's why it's good because we can go beyond studying one data center at a time or one solution at a time, but we can look at studying the entire grid, what we call the queue, the interconnection queue of both loads and generators who wants to come onto the grid and optimize them and restudy, adjust that study continuously. So they are not one-off studies, leave them for 5 years and restudy again, but these are like continuous daily studies to the point of if an executive or Meta or Facebook, or Microsoft, Google, etc., want to connect here, can we turn around these studies on a daily basis? So that's the outcome we're achieving.
Because one data center might be planned in isolation, but if you don't know what another company is doing, suddenly you have two data centers in a close
Mhm.
setup, and now the question is, can the grid handle it?
Exactly.
Now, Alexander and James both asked a very similar question, and I thought I bring it directly after Daniel because it is the same, only at a different end of the grid. So Daniel asked about consumers of energy, data centers. How do we plan for this? Alexander and James ask the opposite. It's kind of like, hold on, we have solar, we have renewable energies. Optimizing the grid, does this mean that those are more effectively or less effectively? Does this have an impact? Will we be stuck with gas and oil forever? And I think I know the answer to it, but like, tell us.
Yeah, and it goes back to, let's say, energy is very fluid, it's very dynamic. We need to balance them continuously. The shortcut in that case is to put batteries everywhere or energy storage everywhere. But that is also not very cost effective and has to be carefully planned. And batteries also degrade over time. They are an asset. So the best way is actually going back to the cheapest form of electricity, which is intelligence. So can we understand their dynamic forecasts? For example, we are working with NVIDIA's Earth-2 on probabilistic weather forecasting as well, which translates directly into the probabilistic output forecast of like solar and wind. Now, if we just forecast solar and wind outputs and push all these analysis into a black box model or a traditional mathematical engineering model, it's not going to become actionable. So where we play is, can we drive from the solar and wind probabilistic forecast into probabilistic congestions and grid simulations so that when we make a decision or action, it's risk adjusted. And I think that's where the industry is going right now. It is a huge topic to go from fixed worst case scenario to now probabilistic risk adjusted actions. So just like people like to keep things firm with like gas or nuclear and on the generation side, and data centers want firm power, but that's actually not optimizing the infrastructure. So we need to start injecting some flexibilities, which drives us directly into risk-based analysis.
Yes. Meaning, because you have AI for the grid, sustainable energy is actually a feasible option. I'm living in California, and obviously, like it's very like a lot of people have here solar
Mhm.
cells, solar powered cells, but they have a lot of problems to actually inject it into the grid.
Yeah.
because the energy companies in California say we cannot take that energy. As we discussed earlier, it's like water. Suddenly it's there. It has to flow. So the energy companies are not able to bring it into the grid. So a lot of solar power from consumers get wasted
Hmm.
because the companies cannot effectively plan. They are planned for, look, I mean, if the sun is not shining, your solar station doesn't work, and therefore still people still need electrons. So we focus on the fixed setup
Hmm.
and not on the flexible setup because we cannot model it. So
Exactly.
the very idea of using AI for the grid is probably the biggest driver for the empowerment of sustainable energy.
Yes, and I would add to that as well that when we say the utility company wouldn't allow that solar to backfeed, for example, it's not only, or many of the time, most of the times, it's not because they can't take that power, but more so because they don't know. They don't know the impacts of that real-time dynamic power on the grid. And what AI allows is I would compare to the Enlightenment era. So we're enlightening the utility planners and operators to see deeper and more analytical, to look at probabilities, to look at locational impacts in a way that they have never seen before. And that's what's going to allow us to have more capacity, but also more dynamic capacity onto the grid.
Now, let me ask you something in terms of time horizon, how fast and how flexible you are, so that we get a feeling for it. We are unfortunately in a war in the Middle East. We unfortunately have seen that energy prices have gone through the roof.
Mhm.
That has an impact on our industry, and that has an impact on our productivity. So, has the White House been knocking on your door and kind of saying, model this out for us? What would we need to do in order to supply additional methods of energy? How flexible are we here?
Mhm. I think, well, the administration definitely has been involved, especially through the Department of Energy, but we work directly with the utilities. So even if it's with the administration, it's through the utilities as well. But modeling these scenarios is an absolute priority and criticality. Now you mentioned about electricity as well. So electricity compared to like gas and oil pricing, it is far more resilient localized. So these are areas where we have a lot more called sovereignty over the power that we can generate, consume, and the reliability that we have as well. The speed is an interesting one though, because we have been always looking at grid planning, especially resource planning, in a 10 to honestly 40-year horizon for a gas turbine. But now to give you a sense of how fast AI is impacting or learning, since our spinoff from GE into last year, we have been focused mostly on distribution systems. Within 6 to 9 months' time, AI is already learning to a deeper level transmission networks to the point where 80% of our work today is actually on transmission. And so, because AI is rapidly training on not just one or two scenarios, but millions of scenarios, the pace of learning and speed for AI to impact and the outcomes and the applications that we have is hyper accelerating the growth and modernization of this industry beyond like devices and telecommunications, like smart meters
Yeah,
and wires, etc.
very interesting. As you know, I'm German, right? And as the audience probably has figured
We
out by now.
and I'm Chinese.
So here we go, Josh. Um, how active are you in Europe slash China? China is probably more homogeneous because they have more greenfield grid. But if you look at Europe, they kind of were against, like Germany was against nuclear energy. Now they're buying nuclear energy from France. So there is a huge mix of different grids all coming together and interacting. Is this technically all same for you, or is this a way more complex problem because different grids are involved?
Yeah, with that, I'll have my three-layer cake. not 5 layers.
Hold on, 5 layers before, 3 layers now. Let's actually put the layers down. What's the 5 layer cake of NVIDIA and the 3 layer cake of Josh? Here we go.
So the 5 layer cake when the NVIDIA is basically going from the energy foundation to the infrastructure and CPUs and cloud, etc., to the AI models and all the way up to the AI applications layer. So that's the NVIDIA 5 layer AI model. I think here is I see AI learning the grid, but not just the grid, but the utilities, the regulatory environment and the people and process there, right? Because it's always people, process, systems that transforms the industry. For AI to learn, let's say the 60 hertz North American grid versus the 50 hertz European grid, and its topologies and subtleties and asset base, etc., is the same. So for AI to learn and transfer that learning from here to Europe to APAC, it's the same thing. We're not concerned about that at all. Nonetheless, the more complex side is to learn the people, process, and regulations. So meaning taking it from what we call the AI digital twin layer, so the AI models representing the grid, to the agentic workflows around the AI models. So how do we take these high performance grid simulations into the desk and use of everyday users? So how do we plan the assumptions, standards, procedures? What are we optimizing for? And how do we bring the human, and we mentioned the co-pilot concept. So how do we bring the human element into part of the AI learning as well? Something we always say is there's two sides of the screen as a power system planner or operator. There's the grid side, but there's also the person facing side of the screen. So we need to bring the two together. And I think for the European market, that other side of the human factor, policies, regulations will be more complicated and will take some time.
Super fascinating because, and we discuss this quite often, a workflow or an AI autonomous workflow has obviously the AI component, which is heuristic or with a feedback loop. And then it has a human interaction. You have one more layer, which is a regulatory setup,
Yes.
right? For Europe, if certain things are allowed in France, it doesn't mean that it's allowed in Germany, and therefore there's a regulatory structure in the US probably as well. Meaning, looking at an AI workflow, an autonomous AI workflow, we need obviously the AI, we need the feedback loop in terms of what is the true north, which is a heuristic model or a feedback model whatsoever. And we need the handover to humans in order to take decisions, and we need the control in terms of regulatory part.
Mm-hmm.
I stress this because interestingly enough, this is exactly the same workflow, no matter whether you have an AI working on emails or whether you have an AI working on cars or whether you have like an autonomous car or whether you have an AI working on an autonomous weapon. We will have like urge you to sign up. We will talk to Schwarmer, the drone company. They recently went public in another keynote where we go through the autonomous workflow. And if you want to build your own workflows, again, remember Cornell has a workshop on this, and I'm happy to walk you through. So all in all, it is the brain, the heuristic feedback loop or the RL, the handover to the human, and the regulatory or permission document around it. It's always the same structure.
More cakes, more layers.
More cakes, more layers. I have another question, and that question is from Tim. So Tim, first of all, congratulates you to the funding, and I think that's well deserved.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Then but then he talks about how do you do your engineering? How do you hire? How do you set it up? So there is a very straight technical question, which is essentially, do you hire? And how can you apply? But for me, from a more structural point of view, there's another question of how has your engineering changed and how do you hire when everybody, like you probably use Cursor and Codex and other tools? How has this changed? Tell us, like, let's look at under the hood a little bit.
Yeah, this is when I wish my engineering team's here so they can give you the core tech stack that we have, which we can open it up. But number one is Tim, thank you, and we are hiring. We are a small company, but we are actively hiring. I think in the world of AI, it's not the number of people we're hiring, as just communicating my hiring philosophy. It's now the quality, because I think there's going to be so much more productivity with each individual working with AI as well. So I think labs, we are very conscious in trying to blend basically two or three worlds together. One is the power systems engineering world. So about half our team are power system PhDs that actually has done great work in the AI space. So blending those two together. The other are AI architects, hyperscalers, machine learning folks, and then we have the data scientists and data engineers. So bringing and blending all three domains together in a harmonious culture is really what makes ThinkLab special. And I think it's a big, call it defensible moat as well, with many of our competitors. Many times it's the larger incumbents as well, because for them to, in a smaller agile setting, bring these skill sets together, it's critical. Now, do we use AI in our workflows? Absolutely, yes. But now our core differentiation is, I think AI brings the speed of development, etc. But the core differentiation is still around these understanding deep technical modes around power systems with AI and how we bring them together. And that's where we bring a lot of the machine learning, data engineering expertise.
Totally. And this is super important. And I would like to bring this to somebody like into a structure which is also understandable for somebody who is not a power engineer. If you go today to your favorite coding agent, let it be from OpenAI, which is like which would be called Codex, or we do Claude Code, or what, like you plug in a tool into a Cursor, you could easily ask something like, okay, and I do this in the workshop, which I announced a few times now, but like you could ask, for example, like something like find the right tags for my email. Now, there are two problems. Problem number one, what are the right tags for your email? That is dependent on your personal workflow. For the grid, what is the right throughput for the grid? That depends on the knowledge in the grid. So this is not easily creatable. Even if you can easily write it to Codex, OpenAI, or whatsoever, you need that knowledge. The second problem is, even if I go and say, no, 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 I know my labels, and you tell it, then Codex probably will first do an AI using keywords.
Mhm.
And that's a wrong technical approach. It's not scalable, it's fast, but very error prone. And Codex or any large language model will tell you, I succeeded. I did exactly as you wanted me to. That's not usable. It is a side note, which is more of a concern for an engineer and a product manager. So the workflow has changed, but you still need the knowledge about, in this case,
Mhm.
the grid, as well as the knowledge about the AI implementation.
Right.
So I like your mesh structure, Josh, that you
Yeah,
described.
yeah. And maybe one more point on that as well is I think given how many AI tools, for especially productivity driving tools are there out in the market today, the general trend, especially for those who are looking for jobs, is that general AI is becoming more and more democratized. So it's also being a lot more competitive in those positions. Now, specialized AI, especially domain specific specialized AI, and in our many of our discussions with NVIDIA, it is physical AI. So bring AI with the physical world. That is the opportunity today. And if you look at even talk to a lot of investors, that's where they're keenly developing their investment thesis maybe a year ago to, I would say, the foreseeable next 3 to 5 years. That's where the growth is.
Awesome. I think this is super fascinating. We could go on for hours. I would like to end with one like one very open question. Where do you see AI going in the future? What is for you the next big horizon that you see? And obviously, it has something to do with Nvidia because I invested in you. No, but like joking apart, what does the future hold?
Yeah, I think future is relative time frame. So before AI, the future has always been the next, like if you talk about power plants in the next 40 years, if you talk about grid software, we typically look at a 10-year horizon for the next generation of software to be developed. For AI, the future is in 2 years. That's my time horizon.
Yeah,
So even we are the forefront, but we are advancing AI for the grid. I call it the AI powered grid, right? Grid powers AI, AI should power the grid. Basically, every single 2 week sprints that we have, things are moving very, very quickly. Where we see these 2 years bring us is really the onset of the next leapfrog in autonomy. That's where I think the grid is going. It doesn't mean hands off, go drink your coffee, fall asleep, and the car will drive for you type of deal and play video games while you're driving. I don't think that's the future that's we desire, but the grid is fundamentally getting so complex, and the people planning and operating the grid need support. So I think the autonomous grid intelligence to basically have this grid aware physics informed agent that analyzes the grid for you continuously, learns it with reinforcement learning, and proposes options and solutions for you. I think that is really where we hang.
very, very cool. Thank you so much, Josh, for coming on the show. Thank you for all the questions from the audience. And stay tuned. There are more keynotes coming. And talk to you soon.
Thank you, Lutz. Thank you, Cornell.